So the tariffs just got worse.
Tariffs on China could get as high as 245%.
This means that a dollar product in the US will now cost $3.45 in China.
Tariffs against China went from 10% to 20, then to 54, then 104, then 145. And now we're looking at putting a 245% tariff against China. So it feels like we're just a couple steps away from saying infinite tariffs. Let's just stop trading. And China's response is calling the bluff, saying the tariffs are meaningless at this point, and it just makes no difference.
中方的立场一直很明确，关税战、贸易战没有赢家，中方不愿打，但也不怕打。
But it does make a difference to businesses because last year, the United States imported over $438 billion worth of stuff from China. And this new 245% tariff would increase the price of all this stuff by a factor of about 3. And when stuff is 3 times more expensive, investors panic and the markets start to get scared and they anticipate inflation. And that's why the stock market is going sideways and interest rates are going up in the bond market. But the craziest development that's happening right now is that President Trump wants to fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. That would have huge implications on the market and the economy. That's why the stock market is terrified, and China is trying to isolate the United States by pulling their money out of private equity. And that's why there's even rumors of the United States potentially issuing something called the super bond, a bond with a 100-year payback period. So what started as a trade war is now something a lot bigger. It's turning into an economic war, a tech war, bond market panic, and maybe even a central bank crisis. So if you're feeling like everything is breaking at the same time, you're not crazy. I want to help explain the next phase of this story and what's actually happening and why it's happening and what I'm personally doing with my money while the system resets itself in real time. So with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the magic. Now, there's a lot of confusion about what's actually happening to the economy and why it's happening, and the truth is, no one knows. But I want to start this video by framing it through the context of a very cool magic trick. Now, in magic, there's this concept called equivoque or equivoque, which means magician's choice. And let me show you what it looks like. I want you to go ahead and pick a card. Now, it doesn't matter what card you pick, but let's say you picked this one, which is the Jack of Hearts right here. Now, we're gonna put the Jack on top and we're gonna lose him into the middle of the deck. And with a snap of my fingers, with a little bit of magic, we're gonna take your card and turn it into the only blue card in the deck. And that only blue card was your card, which was the Jack of Hearts. Now, I'm gonna do this trick one more time, so pay special close attention. I'm gonna put this one off to the side, and I want you to tell me when to stop. Stop right here. Go ahead and memorize that card. We're gonna lose it in the middle again, and just like that, your card turns into the only blue card in the deck. Except the only blue card was here the whole time, which was your card. Thank you. Please, no autographs. But you can smash the like button and subscribe. So this trick uses a concept called equivoque, magician's choice, right? It's where I give you an option that feels like a free choice, but in reality, it's not a free choice at all, because I made you pick a specific card for at least one half of that trick. But here's the really cool part. Even if I got the trick wrong, I can also use what's called multiple outs, meaning because you don't know where the trick is supposed to go, I can have a lot of different outcomes that all look equally amazing. So even if I get something wrong, I'll know, but you won't. And that's because I could say, well, instead of the card being blue, your card is now in my pocket. Or now the card is a different color and it's over there. But what I just showed you was the best outcome for that trick. And when I look around the world to see what's happening, sometimes it seems to me like the US government is using similar principles and methods to accomplish what they want. And here's how. There's one main objective outcome, meaning there's one main thing we want to have happen, and people debate what that is. But at least for me, I think the US really wants to have lower interest rates, so the US can refinance the $9 trillion worth of national debt that's coming due this year and on a personal level, lower interest rates so we can all start borrowing money to invest and get rich again. And if you're trying to build wealth in this kind of market where rates are high and volatility is all over the place and everyone's predicting something different, you need a platform that gives you options, and that's why I use today's sponsor, Public, a platform built for serious investors who want to take control of their portfolio. You can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and more. You can also earn an industry-leading 4.1% APY on your cash with no fees or minimums. Their bond account is offering a 7% or higher yield by letting you invest in a diversified portfolio of corporate bonds with just a $1,000 minimum to get started. Now, normally you'd need $10,000 or more for something like this, but Public makes it more accessible to start investing in bonds. And one of my favorite features about Public is their AI tool called Alpha. It breaks down complex stock data into simple information, so you're not just seeing what's happening in the market, but why it's happening. So if you're looking to grow your money smarter, check out Public at public.com/Andrei. It takes just a few minutes to sign up, and if you transfer your portfolio, you could earn up to $10,000. Thanks again to Public for supporting this part of the video, and now let's get back to it. So the number one priority right now is to lower interest rates, but economies are complicated because we're talking about geopolitics and macroeconomics, so it's not as simple as a magic trick. So the country has to have multiple outcomes which have to look equally successful. And here's a couple of them that are in the works right now. The US is using tariffs to pressure other countries to drop their tariffs, create fair trade, and make more money. That's one outcome that's better than what it was before. Another outcome is potentially bringing back high-skilled manufacturing jobs so the US can make its own stuff again and not have to rely on a competing country to make it for them. National security for long-term prosperity. That's another outcome, better than what it was before. Or the US could also be using tariffs as pressure points against other countries to cut China off so they can't get around the tariffs and the US can close the trade deficit. Cool, that's another outcome. And if all else fails, we can point to the collapsing economy and say, hey look, inflation slowed down to below 2%, and the price of eggs and gas have fallen, so everything is more affordable now. Consumers win. That's another potential outcome. There's a lot of outcomes to this magic trick, but I don't think we've seen the main outcome yet. What we have seen is something that looks like this. That's the falling bond market and interest rates going up, which is the opposite effect of what we want to have happen. So as an audience, we're just watching this magic trick play out and we're like, amateur, but I don't think we've seen the outcome yet. And it can still be an amazing magic trick, it's just not necessarily going the way we wanted it to right away. And the main effect is, I think, to lower interest rates, and here's why. Because if you really zoom out and look at everything that's happening right now, the tariffs, the bond market chaos, the Fed drama, and even the idea or the rumor of the super bond, it all points back to one thing: the US needing to refinance its debt, or at least some of it. $9 trillion is coming due this year, and if interest rates stay this high, that refinancing becomes a nightmare. Just like most people can't afford to refinance a mortgage at 8%. The US can't afford to roll over its national debt without triggering even more deficits, more borrowing, and eventually more inflation. And in the long term, most economists say that it's an unsustainable path.
In the long run, the US is on an unsustainable fiscal path. The US federal government's on an unsustainable fiscal path, and that just means that the debt is growing faster than the economy.
So the question is, how do we fix that? You can do whatever you can to get interest rates down. You pressure the Fed, you scare the markets, and you maybe even reshape the story around inflation and say, hey, it's already coming down. Now it's time to cut. But when the Fed doesn't cut as fast as it needs to, that's where the magic trick takes another turn and it has to adapt. And President Trump is trying to replace Jerome Powell at this point, the man who kind of controls the interest rate. On April 17th, President Trump said, termination of Jerome Powell cannot come fast enough. And the last time a Fed chair was fired was never. It's never happened in history. And that's because legally, the president can't just fire the Fed chair because he doesn't like the interest rate. He's trying to bring back 0% rates, and Jerome Powell stands in the way of that goal. And the reason he's not lowering rates today is because Jerome Powell believes the economy is in a good place and there's no reason to.
Despite heightened uncertainty and downside risks, the U.S. economy is still in a solid position.
Now, technically, Jerome Powell's term runs until 2026, and the law says he can only be removed for cause, which means misconduct, but not policy disagreements. But that's still not stopping President Trump from looking into workarounds like reassigning Jerome Powell to a different role or appointing a shadow Fed chair, which is someone who's not officially in charge but publicly acts like they are, and that someone might be someone like Scott Bessent.
Do you believe you have the power to remove him, and are you trying to do that?
I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me.
That's one of the main strategies, because the faster the Fed can cut the rate, the faster the US can refinance its debt, and if Jerome Powell won't do it, President Trump will try to replace him with someone who will. And that brings us to the latest trick up the government's sleeve, which are rumors of the super bond. Now, a super bond is just a bond, but with a 100-year maturity. That means if the government sells one of these this year in 2025, they wouldn't have to pay it back until the year 2125. So it's basically the financial equivalent of saying, don't worry about it, future generations will handle it for us. Except the one exception is that the government would have the ability to repay any time they want, whenever it's favorable to do so, presumably when interest rates are low. Because if we refinance all our debt right now at 4, 5, or 6% interest, the interest payments would just eat the budget alive. So the super bond is kind of like kicking the can so far down the road that it sort of disappears behind the curvature of the earth, which might not be such a bad idea. I don't know, but the magic trick's kind of neat. And if they can sell it at a low enough interest rate, then even better, because it locks in that cheap debt for a century. The catch though is, who's gonna buy a 100-year loan to the US right now, with all the volatility, all the inflation, uncertainty, and the Fed drama? Probably nobody. But it is an idea the US government has considered at some point, which kind of brings us right back to the main magic trick. Do whatever it takes to lower interest rates, fire Jerome Powell, blame the bond market, blame the economy, pause rate hikes. Whatever the illusion is, the reveal, I think, will always be the same, which is cheaper debt. But magic tricks and illusions aside, here's the reality that we as an audience are watching play out right now. The markets are reacting in a bad way. The stock market's S&P 500 just had one of the biggest drops in decades, losing trillions of dollars in value in just a couple days. Nvidia alone just lost over $100 billion in market cap. The VIX, which is how Wall Street measures the fear and greed index, went up into the 40s and at one point even hit the 50s. That's what's called panic territory. And it's not just stocks. The bond market, which is supposed to be the most boring part about all of this, is acting like a stock. Short-term rates are also falling because investors think the Fed will have to cut interest rates. But long-term yields are going up. The 10-year Treasury yield went up above 4% because long-term investors are demanding more compensation, not just for inflation, but for uncertainty. Uncertainty about the Fed, uncertainty about President Trump replacing Jerome Powell, uncertainty about whether China, Japan, and other countries are dumping treasuries in retaliation. So even if inflation's falling, the cost of borrowing isn't. And that's what the bond market is telling us. Because unless we bring those rates down, everything will get more expensive. Mortgage rates, credit cards, car loans, small business debt, and even student loans. And it's not just the US. The rest of the world is going through the same thing. In Europe, Germany's facing a recession, and the European Central Bank has already started lowering interest rates to try to avoid a recession. And while all of this is happening, investors are pulling their money out of risky markets and into US dollars and short-term bonds, even with all this chaos. The whole world is going through what economists call a flight to safety. And right now, safety looks like cash, gold, and short-term US Treasury bonds. So the whole world is kind of dropping cards right now, and we're all losing faith in the performer, and everyone's staring at the stage wondering, was that supposed to happen? But that's not how I'm thinking about this, because as someone who loves entertaining and economics and investing, I'm always reminded that the audience doesn't always know where the trick and where the show is going. Sometimes the real effect happens after the misdirection. So here's what I'm doing with my money, and I'm not doing anything different. I'm still dollar cost averaging into VTI, the ETF that represents the total US stock market, because I believe that in the long term, the market will continue to go up, especially if we have a big drop. In fact, I kind of hope that we see a lot more drops in the future so I can buy more of the market. And I'm also still buying Bitcoin, especially when that fear is high and Bitcoin drops, because if paper money systems are the illusion that the government created, Bitcoin is the trick that can't be rigged. Then I'm moving that Bitcoin off the exchanges and into cold storage. And if you want to learn how to do that step by step, I built a 4-hour training video that walks you through everything step by step. You can use coupon code Andrei40 for an additional 40% off. But at the end of the day, I don't know how this trick is going to end. And neither does our government. So before anyone says our president is a genius and he knows, he does not know the outcome. But hopefully, we are smart enough to have set this up with multiple outcomes that are equally successful. I don't know if the Fed cuts rates or if the super bond would ever happen, but I do know how to be a good audience member and to stay calm and keep on watching to at least entertain myself. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to see you back here next week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.